So, Anthony Sutton, an author who wrote a book about the truth behind Bolshevik revolutions. The book was Enthusiastic Alliance with Wall Street and the brightness. Okay, the Wall Street and Marxist socialism. He wrote that without the support of J.P. Morgan's Guarantee Trust and John D. Rockefeller's Chase National Bank and Jacob Schiff's Kuhn Loeb and Company and Olf Ashberg of the Swedish Nya Bank, the Bolshevik Revolution wouldn't have succeeded. And there it is, Maxim Litvinov, a person who is entrusted by the people from Europe, put on a boat to sell newspaper of the Russian Socialist Democratic Party, which they knew Maxim Litvinov would never be suspected by the Russians because he's selling newspapers. Who would suspect a newspaper guy? Nobody. And take a guess where the newspaper was printing. London. And Maxim Litvinov was provided funds to buy arms and stuffs. Now in later days, he got some influence in Russia, and then he became a source of all foreign funds and was appointed as the treasury of the Russian Socialist Democratic Party. And then there was Lenin, who tried to stand against Litvinov and backed off because he was a representative of the Rothschilds, the people from Europe, whose power were far more extreme than Lenin. And a few months later, Litvinov was elected as the Secretary of Foreign Transport Group. And on September 1918, a conspiracy against Bolsheviks involving the British ambassador Bruce Lockhart was exposed. And both Lockhart and Litvinov was arrested by their own government, and as a result of subsequent exchange, Litvinov returned to Moscow, and now his new mission is to save his flow of money from Russia. So now he purchased steam engines from Russia to Sweden, which is, a transisted pathway to the point where he want to, receive his steam engines. And guess what? The steam engine was made of gold and has already transferred quarter of Russia's gold, and at a point where Russia stopped the supply, and now the Rothschilds are angry because they are now up for a revenge, a straight revenge. So as they are up against the revenge, now Litvinov is back in Russia and is made the commissioner of the Council of People's Commissars for Currency Transaction and Sales of Gold Abroad. So now we can legally take out the gold and give it out to the people who he wish. And obviously those were the Rothschilds. And doing all these things, Litvinov said that several hundreds of millions of rubles of gold went through my hands and was sold abroad. I sold the majority of this gold directly through various intermediaries to large French companies which melted this gold either from France or Switzerland, and this gold is taken back to the final destination in storage at the American Reserve Bank. Guess what? Which is in the deep end throat of the Rothschilds. And now Litvinov have become the authorized representative of the bankers. Now he's one of the shareholders of all the banks, because he is one of the banker where he owns the FRB and the Bank of England and Soviet Russia. And on December 1921, the Kuzba's Autonomous Industrial Colony was established, and it handed over the control of a vast industrial complex to a group of American and European investors who had assisted the financing. After that, Millions of gold rubles flowed abroad without any custom duties elegantly as interest of the capital invested by the European bankers. Who are they? The Rothschilds, obviously. And this is where all started to change. 1924, Joseph Stalin became the leader of the Soviet Union. But Litvinov, who feared no one, remained preeminent. His rudeness to Stalin was legendary. In the purge of 1937 to 1938, nearly all of Litvinov's deputies were arrested and then shot. Litvinov pleaded for life for one of his closest friends, Boris Stomanikov, and informed Stalin that he could vouch for him. He was literally begging for life, for Boris's life. And you know what Stalin said? Comrade Litvinov, you can only vouch for yourself, not others. And then he killed Boris. And on the very next year, 1939, the relation between the National Socialist Germany and the Soviet Union started to, strengthen a little bit. And this was anathema to the Litvinov's masters, who had nightmares memory of the Holy Alliance between Austria, Prussia, and Russia in 1815, and Bismarck's, which were the three emperor leagues, concluded between the same three emperors in 1872. And Litvinov objected, but this time Stalin had enough of Litvinov's impudent behaviors. He was fed up with, Litvinov. He was so arrogant. On 3rd May 1939, a quiet coup d'etat took the place of Stalin, dismissed the puppet of banking underworld, from the position of foreign ministers. He took it from under the ground and picked it all up and threw it out of Russia. With its own state bank of USSR, of Gosbank, which was founded on 16th November 1921, the Soviet Union had finally gained sovereignty and independence from the international bankers. So now it is completely under the control of the Rothschilds, European and American banks. No money goes there, no money comes from there. It is completely independent and they can continue their state banking system. And all Litvinov's deputies and heads of department were arrested, but he himself was spared. As he was untouchable, Litvinov was allowed to retire his dacha, but was kept under constant surveillance. And in late 1940s, Litvinov's service were once again required, with the Germans banging on the gates of Moscow. Stalin's desperate situation necessitated urgent help from the West. Litvinov was sent to the Washington as Soviet ambassador. The America were reluctant to lend money to the Soviet Union, but Litvinov soon sorted everything out, and within a few weeks, a loan of $1 billion was granted. A Lend-Lease agreement was signed, and over the next 4 years, $11 billion worth of supplies and services were provided. And Litvinov could call the White House at any time, and the president, who at that time was Roosevelt, would see him immediately. Both these stooges of international bankers pumped gold, that one out of Russia, the other from the people of the United States, into the vaults of Rothschild's Federal Reserve Bank. So now they are in debt and they have to repay $1 more billion. Who does it receive? The Rothschild, of course. And Litvinov was recalled in 1943 when the war turned in Russia's favor. His successor, a foreign minister, Vyacheslav Molotov, provides an apt epitaph. Litvinov was utterly hostile to us. He deserved the highest measure of punishment at the hands of the proletariat. Every punishment. And from 1st to 22nd July 1944, the international bankers organized a conference at Bretton Woods, which was New Hampshire. Its purpose was to establish a World Bank and International Monetary Fund which would govern the relation amongst the independent nation and maintain fixed exchange rates. You know, they want to take control even of the independent countries, which means they completely disliked the state banking system. So they are like they would do anything to take control of that too. Pathetic. And what happened next was the conference was called and everybody went, even the Soviet representatives. But they refused to sign, stating that the purpose institutions were branches of Wall Street. It all connected to America and to the deep and throat of the Rothschilds. This impatience of Stalin in all probability angered the Rothschilds, but there was a little that they could do. While Germany remained undefeated, between 17 July and 2nd August 1945, the Potsdam Conference was held in Germany. It determined the new borders of Europe. From this time, the Soviet Union was gradually frozen out, and the start of the Cold War commenced. You know, maybe some nuclear bombs could pop out. That could happen because it's 1945. The weaponries, the bombs, the machineries, all are, well powerful. They're powerful enough to destroy the world. And Stalin had no designs on Western Europe. His army was completely exhausted, and he had more than enough task on his hands in absorbing Eastern Europe under his hegemony and repairing all the damage to his country, which he had inflicted on himself by provoking Germany into starting a preventative war. From a military perspective, the dropping of elegant nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki was unnecessary. On January 1945, Japan was already trying to secure surrender terms. The firebombing of these two cities served two more sinister purposes, and one was the Japan was having set up of their own state bank. The second reason was the warning to the Soviet Union to not set up a state bank ever again. So the Hiroshima-Nagasaki atom bomb was not really aimed only for them, for the Russians too. And the Cold War was prosecuted initially by the Western countries in order to bring the Soviet Union to heel. Stalin, who was rather more of a nationalist than a communist, resisted and was elegantly poisoned and then allowed to die from a massive stroke, for which he did not receive any medical treatment on 1st March 1953. So this is basically they poison you. And this poison didn't, when he was poisoned, no medical treatment was provided, and he died of stroke. And the Cold War was degenerated into a farce, as the West, and in particular the United States, invested heavily in Soviet Union. So Soviet Union is completely under their control because the Stalin is gone. So until they have a next leader, the most powerful people takes the rule. And huge investments were made at the Gorky plant, which built 4 trucks and the largest automotive plants in the world, Volgograd, which manufactured Fiat cars that were a substantial investment in aviation, computers, and electricity. The Soviet Union became an investment destination of choice. So they are not here to, develop the country, but to destroy it. And I'll tell you exactly what they do. They come to your country, conquer everything, keep you as a slave, and then leave with some they say development. and that's what they did in India. The education system, which was completely manipulated to make everybody a slave to their system. you know Study, get a job, work, be in debt, pay off the debt and die, or before. And they bought the transportation system, railway system, for what? To carry our gold into their country. That's why they did it. It's not for us, it's for them. And they left it here because they couldn't take it. They cannot take the railroads and trains up against their head. They can't. So they left it here. Don't be fool enough to believe that they left all these here, so we should be grateful for them. No. And I'll tell you what they did to Russia. On 1991, the Soviet Union imported and a sworn of advisors arrived from the USA, who introduced the wonders of unregulated free market. And what did the free market do? Capitalism was included in income tax and usury. The primary purpose of these advisors was to present the low central bank of Russia at the right moment, which hardly did less damage than a whole army of invaders in making Russia insovereignty. For almost 200 years, the Tsars and Soviets resisted, but finally Russia fell entirely into the hands of Rothschilds. That's what happened, which is pathetic to hear. Their greed to money, their greed to power is massive. They would do, they are like, their life depends on it. They would do anything to conquer it. You can ban my YouTube channel or anything, because I'm spreading a fake information, or telling all those stuffs. I'm spreading informations which is so confidential, which is I'm telling names, which is a Rothschild. I would specifically say that because history says that. There are a whole bunch of evidences and books written about them, basically, and I need you to know that. And I don't believe it's the Rothschilds on top of the control system, because they might be and they may not be. So I need you to understand that getting rich and knowing how to handle your money is the only way to escape the matrix. Start counting and stay hard.